Wednesday and Thursday because we never know. No, I'm sorry. Like again,
What?
Wednesday and Sunday because we never know. But when we can come in and check in, you're gonna find myself. I'm Yolanda at Dryer Buzz. Over there, it's Angela Stalkup, and we take some time out twice during the week during the pandemic to check in on everybody. And my stomach's growling. I just realized I did not eat.
Oh
Why?
no.
Because I've been busy. I literally have been busy. I try not to do anything on Wednesdays and Sundays, and I found like, oh wait, I got some time. I can do this and I can do that, and
Mm-hmm.
I opened up a bunch of can of worms. I've been painting my chairs. I came home from the store the other day. No, actually, I didn't come home from the store. I left it at the store, but I
Uh-huh.
ordered it for delivery. Cans of a red paint. Okay, red spray paint. I had a old school kitchen set, dinette set that my mom got from one of the neighbors, and it's really heavy wood. So I don't want to get rid of it because
Mm-hmm.
if I were to replace it, what am I going to replace it with in this
Right.
this day and time? But
Right.
I'm like, I really like red, and it's so I painted the chairs red. I'm gonna paint the table red too. I feel like this is gonna be a lot. My daughter is like, go for it. You can always
Mm-hmm.
go another direction with it.
Yeah.
So and plus, why not?
Well, I mean, okay. Yeah, no, I think it's great and a creative project. I just heard the recommendation that one of the ways to deal with sort of this uncertainty around us and
Hmm.
ambiguity is that you want to have projects that have a start, a beginning, a middle, and end. Something that you can
Right.
complete, right, and something that you can control, right, and that's going to make you feel good when you're done, right. And so
Hmm.
I was listening to this therapist, Pauline Boss, and she was like, "This is why everybody started baking bread, right? Is because it was something that was a process
Hmm.
that they could, again, start to finish, completion. Here's proof that it's complete and a way to enjoy that.
Wow.
And so it was something that you can control and also something that you can learn from, right? She didn't say this, but this is me throwing it on there. It focuses you, right?
Right.
Versus saying, oh, I'm going to do the dishes, right? Well, we do the dishes every day, right? So I think that's a great project, right? And then, well, are you going to have your own red table talk? I mean, I feel like we now need to. You actually, we should have done a different color, and
First
then
of all, let me give a
we could,
disclaimer.
we could, we could have our red table talk. We're going to be doing a red table talk now. Have you been at red
Oh,
table?
well, one of the things now that you say that, because they will, if you do record red table segments, they will include them in shows.
There you
And they
go.
do they do oftentimes ask you to go to the table with
Mm-hmm.
different topics that they have. I didn't even think about that because you already can tell. I don't know if you can tell from my new shot here, but there's red all over my kitchen,
Yeah.
black and
Uh huh.
red. And
Mm-hmm.
even though I always say I'm not a diehard Falcon fan, but and of course my hair is red.
Mm-hmm.
It's just my color.
Sure, it's your color.
It's my go-to
Oh,
color.
this was your color
Um,
before Jada took it. So, I mean, I'd say
right.
you are
So hey.
absolutely entitled. So now we have leading women now have their own red table. And a
Even though we
little
were trying to do a little pink purplish and
pink.
so
Yeah,
forth and
yeah.
so on.
I'm
But
gonna scooch
listen,
this.
guys, I know we're trying to still get adjusted, but this is where
Yep.
we come. We talk about how the week has been treating women, and we pause now. We put some things out there. We come back on Sunday and try to give you some surmise it. We also invite you to come on screen with us. If you have a burning comment, it's something that we touch your soapbox. There's a link in the description if you want to come on camera. And listen, you don't even have to come on camera. If you want to come into the broadcast in any kind of representation other than commenting, you can do so. You can allow your camera to be on, or you can just come in as audio and engage with us. There's a link. It's in the description. You just click that link and you can be part of the broadcast. We are on Facebook Live, and today I decided to let us go over to YouTube Live because I hadn't done anything on my YouTube channel.
Oh yay.
I do have some subscribers over there. So hello over there on the YouTube side. And when we finish this broadcast, it will turn into a podcast, which is why we want to get your voice heard on here. It does turn into a podcast. All of those episodes are in that link down below there, leadingwomenweekly.com. And so you can then, if you want to like fast forward or listen back and play back or catch other episodes, because you'll hear us allude to some of those episodes in our dialogue. Angela is, and I'll let Angela tell you, but to me, she is my accountability partner. She's my pivot partner as I pivot. And also, she's a scientist. And a lot of these things are behaviors and so forth. Me, I like numbers and data. Give it to me in the numbers. Or anything other than that, I literally cannot relate. It does not make sense until you give me the numbers. And I am learning that now. I come from that kind of perspective. It makes sense when I'm like, how many? And even if you start a conversation with how many, I lean in. I'm like, wait, what? What are we talking about here? So, Angela, I thought you were ghosting on me. I was like, where is she? Let me get her to check in. That's our topic for today, y'all. We want to talk about ghosting. And we're going to talk about it from some personal perspectives. We're also going to talk about what's going on in our economy right now. Did you know that some people don't want to go back to work in this pandemic, so they are ghosting their jobs. Some people are earning more with the stimulated pandemic funds. So they're like, wait, you mean go back to work at my original salary, or open my business up? Because I mean, think about it. If you had a business and you were, grinding every day, and now you finally get a break. Because if you're a business owner, there are no breaks. There really is no breaks. And you pretty much do it because you love it, or you do it because it was a family business and so forth. And now you get a break. And let's talk about the introvert. Introverts are doing good in this thing because they don't have to go nowhere. And there are no invites coming in. There's no FOMO. It's only the extroverts are like, wait, what do you mean stay home all the time? So people are absolutely ghosting. So Angela and I are going to talk about that. And we're going to talk about some of the downfall and what it means. Also, I want to acknowledge, because you see me looking over there, the Processional of John Lewis. His body arrived back to Atlanta. And they are now driving the city. It looks like they are right now at 5 points. And so they are taking him through the territory by which he has served. 10 terms, was it, I believe?
30 years, more than 30 years.
30 years, yeah. So they are, and they actually have an onboard camera that's bouncing around Atlanta streets.
Wow.
Yeah, so you can literally follow en route with them. And he's heading to the Capitol, where he will lie in state here on a local level, and people will get a chance to go and pay their respects. We're also watching as now somebody has to fill his shoes immediately. And then also, this is going to be, you better believe this is going to be a well contested election when they come around to actually running. Somebody will have a vote that somebody goes in to fill the remaining time, but then there's also going to be that remaining time will run out soon. And so you're going to start to see a number of people campaigning for that, because it's a very popular district that he represented. So it's going to be interesting, a lot to that. Angela, I've said enough to get us started. Come on in and let everybody know, what did we talk about last episode?
What did we talk about last episode? Because time flies. We actually had we missed Sunday because I had some family, and
we didn't miss Sunday. We allowed you to be with your family.
Right, and so I spent some family time, properly socially distanced, seeing a new puppy. My nephews had come to pick up their new puppy not too far from me, and so we got to look at the new puppy. So I was like, you want to talk about something that will make you feel big, heartwarming? It's like the world's going to be okay. The kids have their first dog, and it's lovely. So yes, so I missed you guys, but not that much, because I really enjoyed. I had not seen them. I had not seen them since the pandemic started, and so it was really nice to get to see them. But yeah, so we're backing up a week, but we had a fantastic piece on women in media. We talked about, are women taking care of, are women using technology, right?
Right. This is talking about the digital woman.
Exactly. And so we were, I would say, peripherally attached to the 5th anniversary of Mediascapes. Now, you were on the show.
Mediascope. That's right.
I don't know why I want to call it Mediascape, but it's Mediascope. Sorry. And actually, Mediascape is a thing, right? That but yeah, Mediascope. So we had an opportunity to get into why women have been reluctant to engage in these kinds of platforms, but how this can really be beneficial. And we had a nice little voyage into body image and anxiety.
We did.
And about, you know, learning to be comfortable and sort of finding your voice in these platforms is figuring out how to be okay with how you look. And, you know, Yolanda and I have been through this. I mean, you and I have been through this of saying, God, do we want to do video? Because, you know,
we did a whole year of audio only, right?
Because it's like, oh God, where are we going to, where are we going to
gotta get dressed?
Got to get dressed. Got to figure out, then do I have to do my hair, and so you see, I've resigned myself. But yeah, no. So anyway, but these are issues versus men who literally will turn the camera on. And I don't want to say can, I'm going to say will, because we could turn the camera on too. But there is a perception and a perception of professionalism. I think this is something that I've studied and academically, is that while you can say it doesn't matter, there is a perception. And so, it's something that women have to balance and juggle. But anyway, it was a very good, I would highly recommend that segment. Started in the 2:00 for us. It'll be if you go back and watch the replay, 30 minutes in, it was a good solid 30 minutes, totally worth your time. If you're in this space doing this kind of broadcasting, or if you're thinking about doing anything, broadcasting on social media. Excellent.
And we had a great expert, Dr. Shitachi Egru, who is not only a filmmaker, she's also a professor, and she's literally guiding men and women and brands through this process, because people are quickly learning that they need to become their own media, their own channel, their own production. Whether you want to let somebody know about yourself, your passion, your purpose, or your business. Also want to thank Bill Jenkins for coming in. And he said, who's going to take his place as the civil rights leader? That's another thing that we need to think about. He says, why are women intentionally leaving men out of their topics? Well, you won't find that here, Mr. Jenkins. If we're reading your comments, you can see your comments on the screen.
Then you're included, man.
Right. We also left you a link in case you want to jump in on the topic, because we are always looking for leading men. And anytime we can say men, women, and children, anytime we can demonstrate men, women, and children, we would do that. It says, are men not significant constituency? Well, I mean, when you said constituency, we can talk about the fact John Lewis held that position for a very long time. And when you talk about civil rights, we can very easily flip that script and ask you, well, where are the women in that? Because there's no larger place that women have not been fully recognized, and that is in the civil rights movement. That's why you see Bernice King work so hard to make sure that her mother is mentioned and well respected in the movement. We saw the same thing with the women of SCS. Now, keep in mind, we're in Atlanta, so we can have this conversation all day, okay? There's why you have an arm in the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, SCLC Women, which was kind of founded and ran by one of the leaders, Joseph Lowry's wife, who preceded him in death. And so, it goes on. And let me tell you, let me give you some story. I was at the SCLC convention, and as a matter of fact, Jesse Jackson, talk about women being left out. Jesse Jackson, Dick Gregory, and a third. I can only call him a third because he was like a third wheel. I didn't know who he was, and he was very disrespectful to me. I went up and I asked them, where are the leading women in the civil rights movement? Why, when we come to the convention, we don't, it's so male driven and so male focused? And I got an answer, but this guy, he says, well, go create your own. This is what he said to me. And Jesse Jackson was like, you know who you talk to? Hold up. You don't want to say that to her.
Go create your own. Women created the civil rights.
He literally said,
women created the civil rights movement anyway.
I still don't know who this guy is.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah, nobody knew who he was.
No,
he got on the stage.
But
he doesn't.
I was thinking about this and watching, even just prior to right as John Lewis passed, and talking about and C.T. Vivian and the fact that these two sort of giants of the movement, but there are plenty of women who are alive, who are right there side by side. There are freedom riders who are alive right now. and
Yes.
that
And
we don't talk
who do
about.
I mention? Who do I mention every time we say that? Because it was one of the first, not even the first. It was one of the assassinations. I mean, Marilee Evers
Yep,
Williams, I believe
Merle
so.
Evers.
Her
Yep.
name. I mean, she was at the March on Washington. We
Mm-hmm.
don't even talk about the women that were
Mm-hmm.
at the March on Washington. And so I think we're gonna have to be the ones to champion these
Well,
women
I think so
a little bit more. What is
because
Bill says? Well, hold on. Bill Jenkins is saying I don't know how to use these programs. And then he says Al Sharpton is trying to take over. Oh, well, see, one of the questions we always had about John Lewis is, and because Al Sharpton, I mean, he ran for president, but he why is he not in Congress? Why does he? I think if we were gonna, well, no, because it's Georgia. Let's talk about Georgia. But I don't know why Reverend Al Sharpton. And there was a time, I think the last time I hadn't seen Reverend Al in a long time because I retired from civil rights being a blogger for this stuff. So I haven't seen. That's something I used to blog, and I tell you all the time. 20 years blogging. I spent a lot of time around these people, and particularly in connection with I could get Al Sharpton on the phone and those kinds of things, or tweet him and he tweet me back kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
I went to New York and he was like, "Hey, come on," rolled up, and I just had his ear, and
Mm-hmm.
and one of the reasons I had his ear because I being who I am, during the Obama administration, there was this war going on between leaders. They were taking sides between Hillary and Obama. Okay, everybody knows there was a notorious split during that time. And I remember saying too, or tweeting, or however, I got a message to Reverend Al. It's like, listen, no, you stay out of that. This is a time to
Mm-hmm.
turn the cheek. Stay out of that. We need somebody to be a bridge. If there's
Mm-hmm.
going to be this divide, somebody has to be the bridge in the middle. He respected that comment to the point where every day he would read one of my tweets on his radio
Mm-hmm.
show. Every single day he would
Mm-hmm.
find a tweet of mine to read on his radio show. And I had a chance, and he came to Atlanta, of course. You go and you meet him and so forth. And I did a lot of coverage of. I actually had a chance to shadow he and Jesse Jackson on a couple of trips while they were here in Atlanta to really blog about it, help people understand. Because one of the things that they were trying to figure out is how to really galvanize social media in the civil rights movement, not just having people just tweet and post pictures, but to really follow through, because the follow through wasn't there early on. Everybody would change their profile pic or use the hashtags and so forth. And that's one of the reasons why you see Black Lives Matter movement really shifting the world now, is because it started at a hashtag. Now, how do we get people into the streets and galvanizing, so all of that? But it's interesting you say that, Bill Jenkins, that Sharpton needs to be thought of. And you know what? I think a lot of them are waiting to see how this thing works out for Biden. Keep in mind, with Biden going in, we're going to see a lot of changes. Biden will then immediately have to pick an administration and so forth. So I think it's going to be interesting. What we did not get from John Lewis, and I think a lot of people are worried about, is we did not get him to designate. There's something that happens in Atlanta called the kitchen. I was surprised of this through again being a blogger in this. There are these kitchen table conversations
Mm-hmm.
that happens around politics and in civil rights and so forth. Any leaders, you think it happens in the suites and on the golf course. Well, in Atlanta, it's called a kitchen table conversation, and it goes back to the days when you think about what civil rights leaders, they weren't on the golf course. They were, you didn't know about it and what courses they were on. You weren't allowed to know. Because it wasn't safe. And they weren't in the suites. They were in the kitchen. They were at the tables and many homes across the South. And that's how they would have their meetings. So the kitchen conversation didn't come to a conclusion because people were remaining hopeful that John Lewis will pull through this. And so, how to proceed forward, I don't know if they got the answers that they were. Look, we don't know. They may
Yeah.
have.
Well,
You
and,
know?
and I think that we are not going to see any more leaders come out of that generation, because that generation has gotten to be,
Mm-hmm.
old. Um, in spite of the fact that all of our presidential candidates ended up being over 70, and almost all of them, then over 60, right? But
Yeah,
I
and
think
all the
that we're
young
moving,
people got out of the race.
yeah,
That was disheartening for
the,
me.
and we're moving into, I mean, John Lewis was, started his activism as a teenager. He was, a baby in his 20s at Selma.
Hmm.
And so, we have everybody involved in that movement. Dr. King didn't live to be
Isn't
40.
And
I
isn't
mean,
that funny? I mean, Dr. King at 39, and
yep,
and that was well into the movement.
yep.
But isn't it funny how isn't it ironic how they did all this in their youth, but then we won't pass the torch to our young people.
Well,
We still
and
want to question the age and the wisdom and so forth.
exactly. And so I think that we're going to see the leaders coming out of this new generation. And we've got
Hmm.
Black Lives Matter, we've got the squad, right? We've got AOC, we've got that group that is going into politics. And I
Hmm.
think it's going to look different because they were, the group that came out of the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s
Hmm. Hmm.
were of their moment, and they were able
Right.
to, and they used they used media, they used their
And media
opportunities
and
and
media was
visuals.
new to them. Think about it,
Yes.
because when they said, with the Freedom Riders, what happened with the Freedom Riders and the Selma March, media was just then turning. In fact,
Mm-hmm.
that was the first time the
Yep.
cameras turned on. And even though people have been fighting for their rights forever, it's like, wait, here it is in my living room,
Yep.
or not, it wasn't in every living room. Many people watched it in the
Mm-hmm.
department stores, but there it was. You can't say in
And
living color because it was in black and white, but
yep.
there it was. And that's the thing now. It's like we got social media. That's a new platform. There it is. You
Mm-hmm.
can't shut it off. It won't be quiet. It's running 24/7. Everybody has a voice. From the
Mm-hmm.
person that's on the front line of marching to the very person at the end, they all have a vantage point.
Yes.
Everybody has a vantage point right now, whether you want to use this technology or not. Everybody has a vantage point for whatever it is that you are passionate about. If it's human rights, animal rights, uh, even on the planet, in outer space, everybody has a lens that for which they can then direct that lens. And even if you want to direct that lens at yourself, okay, this is now an iconic pose. And I'm gonna
Well,
tell you, 20 years ago, Angela,
yep.
when I was walking around like this, people were like,
Nobody knew what you were doing.
what
Yep.
is she doing? Why is she, I would be in restaurants at a table by myself and having this doing right here, what I'm doing with you. And people would think I was crazy. Like, what is she
Yep.
doing?
Who's she
And
talking to?
the restaurant owner, the restaurant I used to go to, they were like, oh, she's live. And they were like, what do you mean?
What do you
Who
mean?
is she talking to over there? Why is she showing people her food? Because when they come to Atlanta, they come here to eat because they see it on her screen. And now it's the norm. Everybody takes pictures. You just have to continue to let things happen and let things evolve. He says, I hate there are no rappers. Actually, that's not true at all, because there are some already elected. Understand this, and thank you so much for engaging this. I guess we're going to
Mm-hmm.
say that Bill is our leading man
He's our leading man for the day.
for the day. There is something called the hip hop caucus. It's like there's the black caucus, the Hispanic caucus, the women's caucus, the Democrat, the minority, the majority. There is something called the hip hop caucus. And when you go and look at it and figure out how long they've been around, because we're in our 50s, okay? The hip hoppers are in our 50s, right? That our generation.
Yes.
We've got a caucus. We have elected people to Congress. Okay, one of them ran for president, Cory Booker. Is probably, hopefully he's in the hip hop caucus. He's from New Jersey. I hope he's in the caucus. But it's a very well organized, very well structured, and they're getting some things done. So
Well,
go ahead.
and Yolanda, can we go back to John
Yeah.
Lewis for a minute? Because I think this is really significant. And looking at, we're still in six days of celebration of life for John Lewis, and to look at from a communication perspective, because that's where I come, that's my framework, is
Mm-hmm.
to see that they settled on a narrative, right? They figured out what their narrative was going to be, right? And
Mm-hmm.
all the way back to Dr. King and that original group, and then John Lewis being the younger generation joining that,
Right.
and so John Lewis understood, and they all understood the importance of a story and communicating a story. And John Lewis told that narrative and kept that narrative alive of Selma and the Edmund Pettus Bridge all the way until he
Mm-hmm.
died and had
Mm-hmm.
his body carried across that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw, I'm like, that was a beautiful ceremony. And I thought, well, who will object to
Mm-hmm.
this? I even saw people complaining, though, not,
Mm-hmm.
not that, oh, he didn't deserve it, but it's like, oh, is this rooted in trauma? Are we celebrating his life as rooted in
Mm.
trauma? And as someone pointed
And
out,
it was.
he planned that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and his every year he went back and recreated that, and this was part of his arrangement, right?
Mm-hmm.
His family and he himself participated in saying, yes, his whole life was rooted in trauma. He was jailed, 40 times? How many head injuries did he sustain, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Multiple head injuries. But he said, I'm going to keep this narrative alive so it's not forgotten. It's the same thing that the
Mm-hmm.
Holocaust survivors did. They're like, we have to tell these stories because it will be forgotten, because we forget very quickly. And
We do. We do.
we forget. And so I think that John Lewis showed, not only did he keep it alive, but he showed a model of it. And now we
Mm-hmm.
have, and I think Black Lives Matter is doing a really good job. The four women that started that, and again, now the social media generation of, for example, like Say Her Name, right? Or other movements where we recite the names of those who've been murdered by the police, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
and so to the point that the band formerly known as the Dixie Chicks, the Chicks, did a song, and they did a video, and they just showed the names. They just started showing name
Mm-hmm.
after name after name after name
Mm-hmm.
of
And
black and
it doesn't
black and
stop.
of black men and
Yeah.
women who had been killed. I'm like, this thing of saying their names, right? So this is
Mm-hmm.
all part of, we're not going to forget. Let's not forget, right? Because we have a terrible, terrible memory as culture,
Short term.
short
Yeah.
memory.
Short term memory.
and
Yeah. Short memory.
and
Mm-hmm.
so it's like, I think that we're going to see, but what John Lewis
Mm-hmm.
did so effectively, and yes, and I think with what I love about what they're doing with these 6 days is they really are commemorating every piece of it, the boy from
Mm-hmm.
Troy all the way to, right, to Montgomery, to Congress, to Atlanta, that we're seeing, an arc of a life involved in activism and politics and so forth. But to say this, he crafted the narrative, and he told that same story. He told those
Mm-hmm.
stories over and over again. The stories about preaching to the chickens. Do we not all know about preaching to the chickens? And I
And
heard a
isn't it
teacher.
funny how everybody can recant his stories
Yes, because he
verbatim?
told them
Like
over and
you don't
over.
paraphrase him.
Mm-mm.
You say
No,
them verbatim because
if
you've heard
you
it, because it had to
you
be explained. Some
yes,
like when people talk about his head injuries, reason why you know about the head injuries because people always wonder why does he speak the way he does
mm-hmm,
early on? Why was his thought patterns the way they were? It was because of the head trauma that he
yep,
went on to have to live with. I love. They said that he even like a week before. Once they painted the Black Lives Matter
mm-hmm,
mural on that he actually traveled
mm-hmm,
to that, and
right,
there's one of the last photos of him. Not, and I don't think he looked different. He was frail,
mm-hmm,
but
right,
the pride, you
yeah,
know, there still was so much pride in his body.
mm-hmm,
Imagine you set out into the world that you're going to make Black Lives Matter.
mm-hmm,
And you get to see that day. How many of us are so passionate about something on that scale, right?
mm-hmm,
At the end of the day today, I'm just going to have red table and chairs, okay?
mm-hmm,
But to set out to something on that scale and get to see it. Dr. King didn't get to see it.
mm-hmm,
C.T.
mm-hmm,
Vivian got to
yeah,
see it. They all got to see the work. And so for that, I think that we have to, if it doesn't make you sit up a little taller,
yeah,
I think it should make us all sit up a little taller. Even last night, overnight, I woke up in the middle of the night and there was a live video of them removing yet again another Confederate
mm-hmm,
monument.
sitting up,
You
yeah,
know, yeah, there was another one, and I'm asking the question. I'm like, wait a minute, how were there so many of these things placed around us? Because truth be told, we didn't really know what stood for what. Like you said, short memory. And then it's like you walking down the street, it's like, oh, that's new. What does that even mean? You don't know who paid for some of this stuff. Who what do you call it? When you pay for an installation or art commission, you don't know who commissioned all this stuff. But yet again, it popped up all over Atlanta, street names and so forth. I'm outside of Atlanta. There's a movement here that's I think each Friday we had Triana James on. Triana Arnold James, she's running for office, but she's also part of a coalition that they're trying to get. There's a tiny piece of a street, like that much, across the street and it's gone, but it's called Confederate. Just that little piece, whatever, trying to hold on to whatever they can hold on to. You're riding down Main Street and all of a sudden the GPS is like, tells you you're on Confederate Avenue. You're like, wait, what? Why? And you speed up a little bit because you want to get off of it or get out of whatever territory that you're in. It's like, it's crazy. It's so crazy what's going really on, these aggressions and so forth.
And as a white person who comes from a family that lived almost 400 years in the South on both sides, right? Let me tell you, the stories of the Confederacy are ingrained and are told over and over again. So I understand why people wouldn't know and pay attention, right? But if you come from that kind of a background and family, you're told those stories, right? You grow up at the knee of your grandfather, who grew up the knee of his grandfather, who fought in the Civil War, and you hear this story. And so this is where John Lewis's counter to this, right, was again a traditional storytelling model, right? That really goes back to like the African griot, right? Where there is someone who is entrusted with the story, right? Entrusted with the story of the community, right? And John Lewis put himself in that way. So he had the story and he told that story the same way over and over again. That's a traditional storytelling technique, right? And now in marketing and advertising, we say, know your message, hit your talking points. But he was drawing on something that was an older tradition, which was a teaching model, right? And it's like, how did you teach in a time when people couldn't read or write or did not have access to print material, right? Is you had to tell that story and you had to tell it the same way. And then you made everybody tell you back the story to make sure they had it. And so he modeled an example that we can now take, but now we don't have to memorize it. We can record it, right? But we still have to make sure that we're keeping that true. And I mean, look at how hard how hard Mrs. King had to work to keep her husband's legacy alive. She spent her entire life keeping that alive. John Lewis spent his entire life, again, even framed his funeral so that he went on his way out. He's like, I'm going to hit you one more time about the boy from Troy and the chickens and the Selma Bridge, right? And it's like, don't you forget. He's like, don't you forget what I went through. And so now, I think this is a great question that Bill raised, is how do we keep that up? And I think we're seeing this next generation. It's the kids from Parkland. It's, Malala Yousafzai. You've got Greta Thunberg, who is the climate change activist. They're all young, right? It's young people. And it's going to be the same thing, who pick up the story, right? John Lewis's story has been handed off. He's old enough to be our father, right? So, but I don't think it's being handed to us, the children. I think it's handed to the grandchildren.
Yeah.
It's handed to the millennials. It's handed to the 30 and below. And they always are the ones that are doing it. And I think, I think it's remarkable.
I think our generation, I mean, when you talk about if we ever had to say make America great again, I think our generation can say that because we did come, not just even behind the civil rights movement, we also came behind the movement, the Black Panthers, the Vietnam, the Kent State, all of those issues, the onset of gay pride. I mean, all of those things. We were just that generation behind the warring of America. I don't know if that's the term of it, but when all of these things were going on, when the rights of, because we came when there were laws where you could not discriminate based on race, gender, sex, and all that. Our generation, and Bill Jenkins is Black Ice, who used that comment on when we were on Instagram. I wanted to let us know that if we we were just that generation. So we also have to question what happened on our watch. I mean, our generation ended up as a president, right? You know, we talk about Barack Obama. He's part of our generation. We claim he and Michelle. They're not. They're right on the cusp. Right on the cusp of the boomers and us, right? In our generation. So to that, when we think about is it handed off? Yeah, I think it was handed off very well. I think it was handed off to Barack Obama. I think Barack and Michelle Obama took, you know, even though Barack Obama coming up and saying he's going to run for president, even though it shocked the entire civil rights movement. But I have a one, again, like I said, in blogging this, I have the video, I have the most amazing piece of video of Joseph B. Lowry talking about, hey, listen, we don't owe the Clintons anything. When he remember I said there was a split going on whether or not Black leadership was going to support Hillary or Barack Obama, and they literally were going the way of Hillary. And until Joseph Lowry met with young people and said, hey, wait a minute, who is this guy? Literally, he said, who is this guy? Who are these young people championing, and why didn't he come via the civil rights movement or the endorsement of the civil rights movement? And he didn't. Barack Obama did not. They had to be made aware of this man, right? Because again, they were overlooking our generation and the moves that we were making in silence, as people love to say, we're moving silent. That comes from us. And he was speaking in the pulpit here in Atlanta. It was a night the left was going against the right, and you know, this great debate as to where we were going on this. And I remember nobody knew what he was going to say, but in that moment, and being the only media there to capture this thing live, I ended up with this video of him saying, hey, listen, you know, the Clintons have had their chance at the White House. We don't owe the Clintons anything. In fact, they owe us. And it was that I got a chance to play every time Hillary was anywhere. You can obviously tell I wasn't a Hillary person. But to have that, but then not to have that, but to witness how it worked in the passing of this torch. If you think, you know, yes, it always is about our young people. And I wish we paid more attention to that, because in a time such as this, and I'm looking over again my shoulder because they're getting ready to start the speeches. People are getting ready to speak. You guys will stay with us. You'll get a chance to watch that in the recaps. But John Lewis's body is now in the state capitol. And I think they said the mayor and a few other people are going to speak, and then they'll let the public in and so forth. But you know, to have these stories and have the archives that I have and the footage that I have, you know, going to all those galas, even though I got escorted out of one of them. The first one I went to, they were like, we don't know what that internet stuff is. You know, you got to go.
You got to go.
You know, I mean, literally like Secret Service and all these people came out of nowhere, like, because I had interviewed earlier that day. Their entertainment for the night was Freddie Jackson's story time. Freddie Jackson, as you know, is one of the R&B crooners, and he was like, "Hey, I'm in Atlanta." I apparently done one of the best interviews that he loved. He said, "I'm in Atlanta, at the Hyatt, because all the events were at the Hyatt." And he was like, "Come down," and I'm trying to figure out how to get to the green room. But yeah, I'm lost, but I'm on camera, and all of a sudden, all this security comes out of everywhere. Like, ma'am, you gotta come and go with us, and I got escorted out. But after that moment, I was absolutely invited in and into the table at a lot of these things. I worked a lot in our community and had initiatives for our young people as well as for women. If you want to know my background and why would I do leading women, because you know, I've got a history in this city of hosting events, giving women a chance to talk and express themselves, and it attracted the attention of a former president, Jimmy Carter, and I got the message that, hey, former president, Mr. and Mrs. How do you say it? President and Mrs. Carter.
And Mrs. Yeah.
President and Mrs. Carter would like to come to your event, and I'm like, what? What do you mean? Come to this event, you know? And they did. In fact, it was on. They were doing the photo op. He was going to go to this event and that event. Where events were focusing on mental health, and my event was focusing on the mental health of women. And Mrs. Carter told President Carter and Secret Service, I think I'm going to spend the day with Yolanda. So they then Yeah, they then had to get a second detail to stay with her. She stayed with us, sat right by me. We were in a circle of women in the community. We were having an amazing luncheon, and we were talking about where we were and what we were going through, just trying to exist in the world. And, mental health is a strong focus of the Carter Center. And so First Lady stayed with us at that event. But it didn't just happen like that. They let you know time in advance. Here's what needs to change. Here's what needs to happen. The caterer had to send the list of the food and all of this, and their food had to be prepared separately, and it was all kind of stuff. And I think it was a buzz going around town because I hugged the president.
Oh, wow.
I mean, he came in for it, and we went for it, and it ended up a photo in the paper, of course,
right,
and so forth. And I've had some really great moments. I remember I was in a meeting. Another story time. We're gonna move on, but I was in a meeting, and former President Jimmy Carter was in that meeting as well. We were talking about some initiatives in the community. I was a stakeholder in my community, and everybody was getting all heated. And he literally in that meeting said, okay, why don't we just do this? Let's just listen to Yolanda. Yeah. And I'm like, okay. Okay. And now, and everyone in the room are like, whoosh. And I'm like, okay,
yeah.
Wait, what was I saying again? I don't know.
What was I saying?
And you already know, you said all the time. I mean, I had a moment to speak and I spoke and things got done. And that's just where we are. But we want to move on to our topic. We are at 2:16, and thank you so much. Says lives have survived. So many people were persecuted. Oh, that's where we're going right there. Thank you so much. Mr. Bill Jenkins, our leading man. He said he doesn't know how to work the platform, so he's not coming on, but he is killing our chat over there. Anyone, he says, anyone could teach truth. And he said, John Lewis is all about truth. He said, also, he said, color should make no blank difference. You can see that. And you guys can comment as well. If you're catching this video, leave us a comment. If it's during the live, we'll bring it on screen. If it's not, if it's during the after, we'll definitely jump back in and answer some of those comments. The videos will remain there, but again, this has also become audio. All right, so we want to talk about our topic of the week. We just talked about we're going to talk now about what's earning and what we're learning. Angela and I had to have a discussion this week. We had to learn about ghosting. Like I said, I'm caught up in, I think, a personal situation of ghosting. You know how you look around and you're like, where'd they go? You know, like, what happened? What happened? And the first thing when ghosting happens is, and it's designed this way, it's designed to make you think, what did I do? Right? When really it's you learn once you investigate. See, the investigate part, Angela, you and I do that very well. That's the part that a lot of people miss it, because imagine if I said, wait, did I do, or I must have done something wrong. And I'm like, no, let me investigate this thing. Let me peel back some of these layers. That's the courage part. That's the strength part. That's the person who says, I'm not going to allow the status quo to just exist. Let me investigate. We want to talk about ghosting because it's hurting women, and it's out there at a number of levels. When you see a lot, and women have. Angela, you said it a while ago to your point. You were saying that when John Lewis was telling the story, he kept up the narrative. Well, sometimes there are false narratives where, and a lot of times those false narratives plague women and women groups. Like we live with this narrative, like we have a cohesiveness. You know, we support each other, but see, numbers don't lie. Okay. We can say all day, you know, that we're good as women and we support each other, and we can look like we're unified, but the numbers don't say that. And I'm going to talk, we'll come back to the personal. And one of the reasons I said the numbers don't say that, because the first place we look is the Forbes list. Whenever the Forbes list comes out, you know, men are always way up there at the top. In fact, men are so dominant on the list that they have done a separate list just to show you where the women are. They put the women over there by themselves, because if you really had to look at them on the totality of the list, you would realize that we're not where we ought to be
Mm-hmm.
and where we should be. But ghosting, Angela, if you want, can you give us kind of some of the scientific background on what really is ghosting and why is it affecting women so much? Talk about that a little bit for me.
Yeah, so ghosting, and there's various iterations of this, right? But we're talking about somebody who just sort of disappears, right? And this would be where you had some sort of, some sort of relationship, and then without explanation, one member of the relationship just sort of vanishes. And
Mm-hmm.
that can be, and there's a lot of terms around it, but it can be a slow, there's what they call it, submarine, and somebody bobs in and out. But anyway, it's this idea of, it gets back to what I mentioned at the beginning. The researcher and therapist, uh, Pauline Boss, coined this term in the 70s called ambiguous loss, and it's actually a type of grief, right? Is that when
Mm-hmm.
it's the loss without closure, right? It's the person who goes missing. So actually, some of the study came out of MIAs, and studying the families of MIAs in Vietnam, right? That the person is physically, is like they disappear without a trace, right? She worked with families who of kidnapped children who were kidnapped, right? Missing children, and and you don't know, are they alive or dead? You don't know, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can also, what we're talking oftentimes though about ghosting, is they may be physically present, but non-communicative, right? That they're emotionally, mentally, intellectually not connecting. And so that's really what ghosting is that they're walking around. You can see them. Usually you're seeing them on social media, right? Or they may be
Right,
in your
right.
circle, but there's no communication with
No
you
more
where
interaction.
you'd had this existing relationship. You talked about people ghosting their jobs. To me, that's a little bit different kind of ghosting, is that you just don't show up, right? You just don't show up. And I have had employees do that to me. They just didn't show up, right? Tried to track them down, can't find them, right? And then it's like, well, I want to make sure that this person's not dead, right? You're talking to their emergency contact, and they're like, no.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, no, I know they're okay. And it's like, all right. So, but so ghosting really is about this ambiguous, this uncertain, like, what happened? I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
happened. I don't know how long this is going to continue. Are we permanently separated, right? You hear a lot about this with dating, is that people will be dating and then the person just doesn't return any calls. But we see a lot of this in friend relationships, and even in business relationships, where you've had an ongoing relationship, some sort of process, and then something comes up. Usually it's, there's somebody is not returning calls or emails. It just gets to be slower and slower. And
Mm-hmm.
and then so somebody's left wondering, and you don't really have any way to find out. And so it is actually ambiguous loss is one of the worst kinds of losses and grief, because there's no bow, right? It's
Right.
like and we want that final conversation. We want to hash it out, even if it is, I hate you, you're stupid, then right? But you're like, but to your point, the first response of a person who has experienced that kind of loss is to blame themselves,
Mm-hmm.
including the ones who their loved one is missing in war. They're blaming.
Mm-hmm.
You turn it on yourself and think, what have I done? What did I do to cause this? Because
Mm-hmm.
that's the only place you have to focus your attention. And 99 times out of 100, ghosting is not you, it's them, right? It is the classic, it's not you, it's me. It is that other person and something they're going through. But the first response is to say, what did I do? And what do
Mm-hmm.
I need to do? Right? You have this pressing, well, do I need to do something? Right? Should I
Right,
call?
because you first of
Let me,
all, you
yeah.
notice the absence,
Yes.
right? And the other, because the other person, it's intentional. Let's
Mm-hmm.
get that straight. Ghosting is intentional, right?
And I
It's
think,
the weakness
yes.
of it, but it is. Go
And
ahead.
I think, and I want to say that when we're talking about ghosting, we're talking about intentional, right? Now, it
Mm-hmm.
is absolutely, especially right now when things are hard. And look, speaking as a person who has just been consumed with caregiving, you've been through this too. Sometimes I
Mm-hmm.
just can't keep up with people. And if you are watching this and you feel like I'm ghosting you, I'm not ghosting anybody right now. Okay. It's like
Yeah, that's the thing.
I mean, and I know it seems like, oh, it should be so easy for you to reply to a text or an email, or it's not,
It's
right?
not.
That's
Mm-mm,
not ghosting, right? And so sometimes when you're talking about doing research and you see somebody's going through a thing,
mm-hmm,
understand it's probably not you. Even if you feel like I could help or whatever, it's just there's a point of overwhelm that
mm-hmm.
you can't even craft a thought. That's not
Right.
ghosting. That's something else, right? So apologies if you think I'm ghosting you. Although I have ghosted, and I will tell that story a little later.
Well,
And
that's
I
why
have
I
ghosted
say
without and I have and I do not apologize
no,
for it,
don't
right?
apologize for. Well, that's why I say there's a level of investigation that has to take place
Mm-hmm.
because if you were really good with somebody, close with somebody, and you have like we both lost our mothers. You
Mm-hmm.
you took on the role a role that your mother had in
Yeah.
caregiving with your sister. And if somebody doesn't investigate that, like, wait,
Mm-hmm.
where did Angela go? She was
Right.
everywhere. Where
Right.
did she go? They don't slide in your inbox. Then it's like you can question that a little bit. But then again, we are so at a point where people need to be kind of retrained and retaught some
Mm-hmm.
things, and that's why I wanted us to talk about this, so that somebody in them, if it's not you, if it's not me, somebody
Mm-hmm.
will actually say, "Hey, let me do that. Let me go and investigate some things." And because
Mm-hmm.
guess what, the minute they reach back out to you, and you get to say, "Hey, well, in that time I lost my mom, or in that time I had a,
Mm-hmm.
had a loss, or I had something catastrophic happen," and then with that you can come back. It's the
Mm-hmm.
intentional ghosting that
Yeah.
we're saying the only way to come back after that, either to tell the truth or to lie
Mm-hmm.
about it. And you and
Yes.
I, in the situation that I had, we decided I wasn't going to try to address the situation because it's
Mm-hmm.
more often than not that from then on it's going to be around the lie
Right.
as opposed to around the truth. Because in women, one of the reasons, remember now, yeah, guys, ladies and gentlemen, we try to be a little bit more gender specific here because we're talking about leading women. And this is something that is holding women back. It's holding women back. Think about it. Because I told you in my situation, I feel like it's just like the Madam C.J. Walker and Marie Turnbow Malone, right? That
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the name they used in the recent movie. But if
Right.
you think about it, the two women, didn't really work together. And it's been almost all of this time, almost a century now, that we didn't know where the legacy of those two women went. Where did it go? These are women
Mm-hmm.
who led the beauty industry, which is, a couple of $1 trillion industries, and the two women that led it. Think about Black Lives Matter. People were like, well, what? Everybody's now BLM. They talk about
Mm-hmm.
BLM like it's some kind of secret agency. They don't talk
Mm-hmm.
about the women that founded, that started the hashtag, and then went on to develop. We don't even know if many of these Black Lives Matter movement organizations out here have anything to even do with the intentional start of this thing. And so it what we're trying to get to in this, there's something that women don't do well, Angela.
Well,
And
and
is that
well, and also,
communication?
yeah, it is a communicate, and the root of it, and men do this too in dating, right? Is to say it's about being afraid to have a difficult conversation. That's the root of
Ooh,
ghosting. It's just fear of having a hard conversation. That is
yeah,
it,
it hurts.
right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
this is what the person who got ghosted wants, right? It's just give me the hard conversation, right? And the person who ghosts, speaking from
Mm-hmm.
having done that, thinks either I just can't deal with it, right? I
Right.
don't have, I don't want to hurt this person, right? So then
Mm.
again, I don't want to, so there's a version of this, I don't want to hurt this person by saying, I just can't, I just can't, right? I just can't be
Mm-hmm.
your friend, or I just can't date you, or I just can't do whatever, right? And so you feel like there are people who feel like they're doing the kind thing by just disappearing, right? Now that's
Is
a
that what
version
is
of
that what you're
ghosting.
saying? You felt like you feel like you're
That's
being
what I felt like
kind.
I did, right? So it's
You
like
don't feel like
and
you weren't mad, you weren't angry over an issue and things like
no,
that. You
no,
feel
and
like
well, I mean, I ghosted an entire church organization. So I
okay.
ghosted 6 million people, right? And I left a church and I ghosted my friends there because I would have had to have a really difficult conversation with a lot of people, and a conversation I knew they didn't want to hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and I left a space open for anybody that wanted to hear my reason for leaving, but nobody really wanted to, right? Plus, there were risks to me in having this conversation of individuals who could have had caused problems for me and my family at that time. I mean, this is 20 years ago, so it's not anything now. But the point is that I saw it as a way to protect myself, right? Is that I know this is going to open me up to some sort of at least emotional danger. It wasn't physical danger, but deep emotional harm, right? And I knew that I just didn't want to. I just felt like I was going to cause harm to my friends, right? That's a version. That's
Well,
sometimes
isn't
that's a
that something
rationale.
different though, right? I
But
mean, like you
that's
said, that's a rationale.
but again, it's fear of having. I was afraid to have hard
It's a
conversations,
protection.
right? And it is. It's
So,
so ghosting can be. This is why I'm saying ghosting is rarely about the other person. It's the person who's doing the ghosting. A lot of times they feel like they are protecting themselves, right? Now they may not be protecting themselves, right? There's a version of it where it's done as like a mean girl behavior, right? And I think that is another piece that we see in ghosting that is to me more harmful, and it is classic mean girl behavior. Is that the queen is the person who's a leader in a group will pick one person to put on the outs. It's called in group and out group, right? You can't have an in group if you don't have somebody who's outside your group. And so
right.
as a way, it's like, and it's like bullying. It's as a way of controlling and a group is that the group picks one person who's on the out, right?
Yeah.
And that person is either subject to abusive treatment and speech,
Because
or
that's what you feel like. You
right,
feel like
or
you
is
didn't fit the
just
group.
right. And it's the thing of I read a real interesting article, and this was happening in some sort of super bougie northeastern neighborhood, like some suburb of Boston. It would be like around here if it was like Milton or Johns Creek, some super duper, rich white people place. And there was like the head of the PTA, and she was a classic mean girl, and she was constantly picking who was on the outs, and all the other little pretty white girls were like, "Oh, I'm so scared," and they would actually it's like their mommy and me stuff, and they would not tell whoever decided who they were on the outs with. They wouldn't tell them they were meeting, right? So they're in the
Right.
PTA too, but they're not going to tell them where the PTA is meeting, right? Now that is mean and malicious and done as a form of control, right? And the people that will do this to one person will do it to someone else. And in fact, that's the fear of being bullied, right? It's a form of bullying. It's like, I don't want the bully to turn on me, so I'm going to go along with it, right? So
Well,
that's
here's what
another
I
kind of
don't.
ghosting.
Well, here's what I
Yeah.
don't want people to miss, because look at all the parties involved in this. Like, when I was like, wait a minute, something's going on with me. I involved you. Okay.
Right.
I involved, got a couple other opinions about it. Right. And
Right.
then, so the party of the second part, because the party of the first part does the ghosting. So they're communicating obviously with others, but look at all these people that are complicit in this. And how many of those people say, hey, listen, I'm not in that. Y'all need to work that out. You think about it. And I remember there was a business owner here in Atlanta, just to give the other side of that. They were launching, another restaurant, high end, and they had gone through, making these offers and hired what they thought were the best. And then come opening day, and they were ghosted because people came in and heard their offer, but then they took it back and got counter offers from where they were, and they ended up. He actually had to work the restaurant because people didn't show up, because they used that, came and got the information, and then went back to where they were coming from and got offers to stay. And now they had to start all over in their recruitment, even though they had offered these sign-on bonuses and all this kind of stuff. We're out here, we're doing all of this to have better relationships. When you think about dating, they're saying that women, or men and women, going on dates just to have a great meal. Why isn't there a platform? Let's just go to dinner together. No strings attached.
Right.
I'll pay, or this, that, and the other,
Right.
whatever. Why are people? Because in the end, one of the things you and I did come to a conclusion of, the party of the first part is getting something out of it, whether you know it or not. And the problem, what we've discovered is, you really don't know it. That person who is who's taking somebody out to dinner on one of those app dates, they don't realize
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to hear from that person again. The person
Mm-hmm.
going with them, they know
Knows.
what they already know what they
Yeah.
want to eat. They already know where they want to go, and they have again no intention of following through with this. What and they don't even attempt to like the person or whatever. They're just like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, it's about this meal. I
Yeah,
want
it's
X
about my
amount of
free dinner.
courses, and
Right.
you're trying to woo that person or win that person over to whatever, if you want to friendship, whatever. And they're like, hey, listen, I'm full, got what I came for,
Yeah.
gotta go. You
Well, and
know,
and so as we're talking, it really does, I think, make me say let's narrow this in. That
did
ghosting
we
is
hit your alarm? No, we didn't.
nope,
Give
we're
her a
good.
second, guys. She froze. We'll come
Oh, did
back.
I freeze?
She'll pop
Okay.
back in. I don't know what happened,
Um,
but I'll
can
give you
you?
guys a quick commercial break while we
So can
see
you not
what's
hear
going
me?
on with Angela. You froze in a good part when you pop back on,
Okay.
and it'll probably reset. Hopefully, it reset. There we go. She's resetting. There you go.
Am I
Are you
back?
coming back? You're back. And you frozen. I'll tell you, you frozen. You frozen a good way,
Well, good, good. Um,
not a bad way. But let me
but
just reset,
go
guys.
ahead.
You are watching Leading Women Weekly. We come to you live on Wednesdays and Sundays, just to kind of give us a chance to check in and see how everybody's doing. And we're talking about ghosting. If you just clicked in, because I did do a couple extra shares there. We're talking about all the different levels of ghosting, whether it be personal or professional, and what's going on, because a lot of it is going on clearly, and not just all because of the pandemic, but just simply because people are getting out of you what they're getting out of you, and you don't know it. And
Well,
when it gets to a point you're no longer serving them, and they're gone. So go ahead, Angela. You were getting ready
yeah.
to say.
So I was going to say that ghosting is really not just it's part of something bigger, right? If
Mm,
someone is ghosting or you're being ghosted, it's it's not it's not just that, right? There's typically other things at play. There's other elements in play. And the and so we got to come back down to what can you, the person who is ghosted, who has been ghosted, what can you do about it, right? And so this was a conversation that Yolanda and I had that I think is significant, and considering the fact that I have ghosted in the past, to avoid having hard conversations, is that you have to
mm-hmm.
decide, are you willing to have a hard conversation? Are you willing to hear something hard to hear, right? And so if you are, then you may decide that you want to reach out and say, hey, can we have a conversation? but
Mm-hmm.
but there's only so much you can control. That's as far as you can control it, right? And to
Right.
your point, the person may refuse to talk to you, right? The person may talk to you and just clear it up. Like in my case, I'm like, you do not know what my days are like, right? And I can't even remember what day it is, much less I've got 20 unanswered texts, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I got a family member in critical care, I mean, it's like, it's like, okay, and or a person may not tell you the truth. So there's only
Mm-hmm.
so much that you will ever be in control of that. And so this is where, to your point, when you're doing an investigation, also investigate yourself, right?
Right. Right.
And it's okay, because the thing you're going to do is you're going to say, what did I do? What did I do? But you look at that not in a shame way, right? But back to
Mm-hmm.
your scientific method, right? It's like in a scientific way. Well, what was happening? What's going on here? Well, how might this have been interpreted, right? And not to beat yourself up or whatever, but just to say, okay, and it's a way to check yourself. And if you look and you say, I feel perfectly comfortable with how I've handled this interaction in this relationship, and I'm fine, then
Mm-hmm.
if you have a hard conversation, it may not be hard for you at all. Oftentimes the person
Right.
thinks it's going to be hard for you, and you'd be like, that wouldn't be hard for me. See, we try to guess, right? We're trying to guess what's hard for somebody, and you don't know what's
Mm.
hard for somebody, right? There's no way to know, right? And so when I think about what like I say, 20 years ago, when I just sort of disappeared, I just slowly faded away. That was my ghosting. I didn't go. I did usually think of ghosting as you're here and you're gone. I did a slow fade, right, over a period of months, and it was calculated, right? Because I knew that I needed to withdraw, and I was
Mm-hmm.
looking to, and at that point, I was making a massive life change, and I knew that if I was going to do it and not go insane, that I had
But
to be,
did you
I had
did
to be
you
kind to
do it?
myself.
But did you, but being kind to yourself, that's the leading part. But did you do it because you knew or you thought it wouldn't be understood
I
or you
thought
would be convinced to do otherwise?
I thought I didn't. Oh, I knew I would not be convinced out of it. That wasn't my issue. But I was in a church organization that practiced shunning. So as soon as I say I'm not going to be doing this anymore, they have to shun me, right?
Mhm.
So that was also part of what I did not want to have that conversation, right? Which is like I don't want to put them in a position of having to turn me in, right? Because
Mhm.
it's it's snitching. It's like you got to turn me in. You're gonna have to report that you had this conversation with me, right? If I tell the truth, if I truthfully tell you what's happening, I'm an apostate. You're gonna have to turn me in, right? I didn't want to put them in the position to have to turn me in, right? So I didn't. And so what I want to point out here is that I didn't fail to honor any obligations, right? And I think that
Right.
is part of this, right?
Mhm.
I didn't just not show up somewhere, right? And that's why I
Mhm.
slowly withdrew, right? And I just slowly made myself unavailable, right? And so and somebody may be doing that. I'm sure I've had it done to me, right?
And that's the
and
conversation that we want to have, and that's
and
the lesson we want to
and
give people.
so
Go ahead.
I certainly could have had those conversations. People figured out pretty fast what was happening, right?
Mhm.
And then no one reached out to me. Had anyone reached out to me at the point that it was clear that I had left the church, right?
Mhm.
And had said, "Can I have a conversation to you?" Because I would occasionally run into people and they just sort of looked at me like,
Mhm.
"Okay, if you ever want to come
Mhm.
back, you can." I was like, "Well,
Mhm.
thanks." I had people, who avoid me. They'd see me at professional events, and would be like, "Can't talk to her," and that I, I was not hurt by it. I mean, there was a part of it that was hurtful, but I wasn't hurt by it because I understood that because I had done the same. I'd been in this. I was raised in this, right? I understood, and I understood what they were going to be, what was required of them, and I didn't want to make them do that to me, right? And I didn't want to make
Mhm.
them do that to themselves. So sometimes, now I don't know, they may not have cared, right? And over the years, I've had people who've reached out to me and they're like, "I don't care. I don't care that you're not, that you're still not in the church or whatever. I want to talk to you." And I'm like, "Okay, cool." Um, I also needed to make a clean break. I had to go out and make a new life for myself, which included I had to my employment, everything was tied up in that. I had to go get a new job. I had no, I mean, everything was gone. Had to rebuild a life.
Mhm.
And so I thought there's no way I can do it if I still have a foot in that, if I still have a little hook in there.
Mhm. Mhm.
Most
Mhm.
people that are experiencing ghosting are not being ghosted by somebody that was going through what I was going through. But understand, maybe, right?
Right. It depends. It depends on
And
how they look at it, and the value
exactly.
that they
And
place on
so,
it.
right. And I certainly didn't go around talking shit again about, like I didn't go out and actively talk bad about anybody or about the church, right? I did not actively oppose the church. There are people who leave that church who did, but I didn't. I was like, go in peace. I'm going in peace. You go in peace, right? Peace be with you. But
Because there was this order of protection, and I think that's how we identify in all of these different scenarios. When you and I were
mm-hmm,
talking about this whole ghosting thing, it's like if you there are so many ways in which we do things. There are those of us, you got those that are doing it with malice, and you
mm-hmm,
got those that were doing
mm-hmm,
it with protection in mind. You did it with protection in mind. Yes, you knew
mm-hmm,
you intentionally need to do this, for your own sake, but at the
mm-hmm.
same time, you still had a mindset of protecting others, and I think that makes the difference.
And I will say, I can certainly tell that version of my story that I was a total coward, right? And that I should have stepped up and been more vocal about what was happening. And I probably should have. But the point is that there was no maliciousness involved. Now there are
Mm-hmm.
probably people to this day who really think that there was maliciousness toward them and that they wonder, well, why weren't we friends? Why couldn't you have spoken to me? Right.
But did they investigate?
But exactly. And I thought, I said, anybody that wanted to know knew how to find me. My phone number was the same. I lived at the same house. People could find me. It wasn't like I was not,
Wait,
that you couldn't find me.
wait,
And so,
wait,
but
wait. That's classic. That's classic right there. That's classic. That's a classic line. They know
mm-hmm,
where I am. They can find
mm-hmm,
me. I don't know where that goes into one of these many topics. I don't know if that's the grieving. I don't know if that's a form of abuse.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a thin line. There's a thin line there when you
and
when you resettle yourself and you said they know where I am. They know how to find me. What is that doing to us, the people
Yep.
who are? Because
Who
you
were
said you intentionally ghosting, but you weren't the one really doing the ghosting because you decided I'm no longer going to operate in this relationship by the standards and criteria not set by me. Right? You wanted to change it up, and so that's a part of this ghosting thing. Is when we know it's you get ghosted when you're no longer one like you. Let me just finish the thought. You become ghosted when you no longer want to conform to the designs of the relationship.
Right.
Something changed and you saw it for the better. Hey, I'm getting ready to do something different and it's better for me. But yet, better for you didn't fit the design of the relationship.
Right.
And even look, you said 20 years later, you still saying they know where to
I'm
find
still doing
me.
this. They know where to find me. And guess what? I've had people reach out to me in the last month, and I'm like, no, I'm not returning that call. And it's like because I'm like, and I'm not just how to reach me. You know what to say to let me know that you want to talk. So
that's the other part of this. How do you go back? Because if you allow that time span to happen, because you didn't ever start processing it. Because then when you bring it up, you're going right back in that moment, and that's part of grief.
Absolutely, and again, this is very complicated story, and this is why I'm saying if you are being ghosted, you are probably being ghosted by someone who has very complicated process going on in their mind. Right now, I was ghosted by a person who I had been dating for 15 years. We were in a 15-year relationship, and I was ghosted for a period of time. We reconciled after a point, but he literally just didn't return my calls, and he was going through something massive, right? And he just didn't. He was like, "I just can't talk to you about it," and it was.
But was it protecting you from it?
And he felt he felt he was.
Protection?
He absolutely felt like he was protecting me from it because it was bad, right? But it was so hurtful to me, and I mean I cried in bitter tears. I'm like, just don't not tell me what's happening, and don't not tell me that you're okay, right? So I just want to say I have been on the other side of that, of an intimate partner ghosting me after a long time, and like screaming in pain and fear for that person, right? And resolving that, again, that this whole, over a decade relationship was just going to be right. And it's like, don't come see me, don't, right? Don't talk to, it's like, okay, all right. And so it's, it resolved, right there. It did resolve, but I was moving forward of saying this may never ever be resolved, and it would have been a lot of crazy loose ends. Now I don't there's no way, I don't think we could have ever not spoken to one another ever just to tie up some certain things,
right?
But it was so hurtful to me, right? And I went through, oh God, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have done that. Again, this is the thing, but very quickly I realized, no, it's him. He's going through a thing, and that I could probably help with if he would just let me, right? So this is the other thing, is that you there's only so much you have control over, right?
Yeah.
And so this is where you, the ghosted, have to decide what is going to bring you peace, right? What will bring you peace? So is it that you're like, I need to have a conversation, I'm going to force this conversation, right? Or is it that I'm going to pursue? My rule is 3 times, right? I will reach out to somebody 3 times. So it's like, I will, if I leave you 3 voice messages.
What does that look like? I was going to say, what does that look like?
So let's say that I message you 3 times in a row, right? So it's like 3 times, and I'll be like, hey, let's check out. Hey, let's catch up. Hey, let's catch up, right? Or then after 3 times, like 3 voicemails, right? I go, okay,
but isn't that our problem though? I just feel like that's our problem. The people on the ghosted, the ghost, right? That's our problem, because you're being ghosted simply because you're already doing too much. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
and
Because
this
my
is
motto
yes.
is don't let them dish you twice. So
Well,
I
there you
would
go.
say
See,
reach out
you're
once,
like you're once, and I'm like I'll give somebody
one
three
and done.
times.
Right.
Right.
I'm
Well,
a
see,
one and
and
done kind
that's
of. Oh, again, I'm
yeah.
a Scorpio.
Well, that's your Scorpio, right? And I'm a Taurus with Gemini rising. I want to have friends and talk, but I say three because I know how hard it is, even in a good time, for me to stay up with messages and emails and whatever. So I'm like, hit me up three times. If you don't hear from me after the third time, something's going on with me, right? But it's like, but back to your point, right? One and done is fine. I just think it's like you have to be prepared that there'll be no response. But if you need, if you need to send that, right? You need to say, hey, is there a problem, right? Like I really loathe someone sending me a message that says, are you mad at me? Are you mad at me? I hate that so bad. Now I
And
am.
you're like, do I have
Now
a
I
reason
am.
to be? Yeah,
Yeah,
I
now I
am.
am.
Yeah.
Right.
And then are
Because
you
that's
prepared to hear? Yes, I
that is
am.
right. So I'm like, if you feel like you're being ghosted, don't lead with, are you mad at me? Again, this is where we've still yet not had really good language around how to approach somebody, which
Because
is
women aren't given good language.
no, we're
Women
not.
are not given good language. Men
Yep.
will be like, hey, what's
Hey,
up? You know,
hey, what's
I'm
up?
with
That's
it,
it. Hey,
right?
dude, what's
We
up?
good? You
Yeah,
know,
we good? Yeah. And
women.
it's like, and I tell you, that can be the female equivalent of that can be, hey, checking in, all good, right? We could say that we good,
Right.
and that
Yeah.
right there. And if you don't hear back from that, again, like I say, after a couple of, I would say give them at least twice, right? Then it's on them, right? And it's okay. Then 3 months later, roll around. Hey, I was thinking of you, saw this, because sometimes the person's circumstances have changed, and if they have ghosted you, then they feel
Mm-hmm.
bad that they did it, and now they don't know how to
And the
come
inbox,
back
I'll
from it.
tell you, the inbox is the perfect place to do that because when
Oh
you do
yes.
send a person a message, and then you got the date, the timestamp on there,
Mm-hmm.
you've got the previous conversation, and if you want to
Mm-hmm.
do, my one and done or
Mm-hmm.
Angela's three,
My
you got
three.
you get to see it. You got your
Yep.
first message unanswered, your second message
Mm-hmm.
unanswered, and then here comes that third. So the inbox I think, is a perfect place to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, picking up the phone, we don't do that no more. But
No, we
I would
don't. And
definitely say the
yeah.
inbox,
No, and
so
that's
that
it.
you can see it yourself, and so that you can see that you've done
Mm-hmm.
you've done your part, you've done a thing, but really investigated what's really going on there,
Yeah.
because it's the person that's ghosting. They're
Mm-hmm.
not think they have their diabolical plan, because
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
don't ghost without a plan, right?
Well, that's
You
it.
don't ghost
You
without
to plan.
process. There's a
Yep.
plan, and they are in the process of executing that plan. If you're on the other end and you feel ghosted, it's like you look up all of a time, and all of a sudden, it's an all of a sudden kind of thing. It's like, wait a minute, I hadn't heard from this person, or
Mm-hmm.
the absence. You start to notice the absence, right? Or you
Mm-hmm.
share so much in common. You're like, wait a minute, I haven't had a chance to share. I wasn't asked about this, and wasn't asked about that. Or they're not looking in. You notice an
Mm-hmm.
absence. If you are the person to notice the absence, then understand that there's something intentional. And the intentional is okay. We were just saying if it's malice or if it's protection,
Right.
you can know whether or not that you can say it's this. Like in my situation, I
Mm-hmm.
didn't say to you it was unbecoming of a person. I said
Right.
to you, I noticed some things with somebody else. So if you
Right.
notice some behaviors with other people, it's bound to come around to you
Right.
in your turn. So that's why Angela
Yep.
and I agreed that I wouldn't do even the one and done. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
We investigated and we found out. I was like, oh, wait a minute, might be just a behavior pattern. But if you
Mm-hmm.
truly notice that a person, it's unbecoming of them, if it's really unbecoming of them,
Mm-hmm.
and let's get grown enough to be able
Yes.
to recognize what's unbecoming of a person and be real and truthful with ourselves. If it's truly unbecoming of them and you investigate it, like Angela said, and be willing to understand the answer that's going to come back, that message that's going to come
Yeah.
back, and decide whether or not it was some malice and that intentionally they were being mean or they were
Right.
just protecting you from something. In most situations out here, if it's not dating, but if it's a long term and a friendship kind of
Mm-hmm.
thing, for the most part, it's probably protection unless you
Mm-hmm.
just been giving all your good stuff, all your
Right.
good stuff to somebody and they didn't deserve it. You know, you need to let that go anyway. And guess what? Somebody's probably been telling you. Here's how you know. Somebody's been
Right.
telling you that is no good for you. Why are you always
Exactly. Why
doing
you?
it?
Mm-hmm.
You don't have it before. Go ahead, Angela.
But that's it. And the same thing. And this applies in business as well. Why are you giving all this stuff away for free? Right. And women are terrible to work for nothing. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Mm-hmm.
either because you feel bad for somebody, right, and you want to help, or you feel like you have to prove yourself. So a lot of times women will say, well, let me prove to you. And it's a thing that women do in relationships as well. And we used to call it, God, what was the term for it? It's where basically you're like trial wifing, right? And it's like, you like where a woman would treat her boyfriend like he's her husband with no commitment because she wants to prove that she'd be a good wife, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, why would he marry
Or
you if if he already got a wife without getting married, right? So I mean, it's so sometimes we just feel like we have something to prove, and so we're giving too much of ourselves away without an understanding. So I think there is something there where
especially
you're,
as it relates to your career. How many times
yes,
have you gone well above and beyond your pay
mm-hmm.
grade? And then
Yeah,
you go in trying to negotiate some things, and they're like, but you're
yeah.
already doing that for nothing, you know?
Exactly. So again, being very clear, and if there's two parties in conversation, understand that both you can be saying something and think you're understood, and somebody else is saying something back to you and think they're being understood, and you guys don't understand one another, right?
One
And this
another
is
at all.
where anything in business, if you get it in writing, if you write it down and you both can agree that this is the expectation, right? This is what we're
Mhm.
going to do, and this is how we're going to be compensated for it, and this is how long it's going to last, right? And this is what's going to be involved. And if this happens, it ends, right? Either at this
Mhm.
date or this work is done, or one or both of us decides to end it. And if it ends, here's how we end it, right? So again, if you're working on
Negotiate
something, exactly, that is something that
ahead of time.
is
You're saying
exactly
do
before
that
you start,
at the own start. But
right?
that is the number one problem that women have.
Yeah,
We don't do that at the beginning.
yeah,
We don't get a clear and concise, like
mm-hmm.
call a thing,
Yeah,
identify it. We've got to know. That's why we want to come to you guys Wednesdays and so we
yeah,
want y'all to take that process. And Angela's gonna come back with the conclusion of that on Sunday because her
mm-hmm.
alarm is about to hit in about 3 minutes and she's gonna fall off and we're gonna get ready to wrap it up, guys. That's a good we hey, I peel back a couple of layers for me. I like that. We women, leading women, all women, we've got to get better at negotiating this thing. And it's not,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not just talking about negotiating at the table with money and all. We got to start negotiating every type of relationship we have, especially even the one with our
Mm-hmm.
kids and our
Mm-hmm.
families, because we keep coming to the table, ladies, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
ask for anything. We don't even come, we don't even get a clear, concise understanding. We were like driving home, like, wait, what just happened?
What
We
just
we
happened?
have
Yeah.
too many experiences as women with this whole wait, just what just happened. Like,
Mm-hmm.
where Angela and I are right now in this life. Even doing this thing, it's like, wait, what just happened?
Mm-hmm.
Too much of that. If you got ghosted this week, or if you needed to ghost
Mm-hmm.
somebody, it comes right back to, well, what did you really negotiate when the thing
Yeah.
started?
Yeah.
What did it start out as? Because one person, and it's really a misunderstanding, because one person thought it was this and another person
Right.
thought it was that, and you failed each other.
Yeah.
You failed each
Absolutely.
other, and depending on who the person is, like Angela's over there talking about she's a Gemini Taurus. I'm over here Scorpio, and she wants to give you 3 chances. Angela say you got 3 chances. I'm like, we done.
We're done. Yeah. Scorpio hit you with the tail and it's like, I'm out of here. Like you
And
get stung and it's done.
that's my thing. I'm like, I'm done. Angela was like, well, you guys can have it come. I'm done. I'm
Yeah.
done.
No. And I'm like, come together, little children, and let's all, I'm going to give you lots of chance. Yeah. But that's it. And also, my mom is a Scorpio. So I know
Ooh, so you
I
already
grew up with
know.
a Scorpio. Yeah.
You
So
already know. All right,
I,
Belinda joined us here at the end. She was over here texting me. I'm like, girl, we live. To clarify, sometimes I say, let me repeat this back to you to be clear. And let me tell y'all, honey, that's a Gemini right there too, as well. Belinda is. I like that. Let me repeat this back. Let's say this thing out loud and to each
mm-hmm.
other, so that we understand what we
Exactly.
are are doing and what the expectations are.
Right. And
Because go ahead.
yeah, and I remember to turn my alarm off, so we're not going to go black. So the but to bring again, sometimes where we get into this ghosting, which becomes complicated in a business relationship, and like if you're in a part of like a business community or whatever, it comes from this, and you see it all the time. It comes from people sharing ideas, right? You're sharing ideas, you're just brainstorming or whatever, and and we move away from the expectation of what's happening. There's a case of oh God, I don't know what the organization, but it was a man and a woman started this organization. So it was a young woman of color and an older than her white guy. She's in her 20s, he's maybe 40. And they started, it was about, they started this campaign. So I think she started it, and then he was doing something similar, and he reached out to her and said, let's work together. Right. And it was the ones that they were boycotting, doing the boycott of sponsors for like Sean Hannity and the who else is Tucker Carlson, who are the horrible ones on Bill O'Reilly back in the day. And so they created an organization. Well, she thought that they were equal partners, but he was not treating her as a partner. He was treating her like an assistant, and he started setting things up and having her do the work, but everything was in his name, and he wouldn't even let her have an email address to the with like the name of their organization. So let's say their organization is stopfoxnews.com. He would not give her, for over a year, would not give her an email address at girl's
over
name
here,
at,
but
yeah.
she continued.
And so finally, you're right. But a lot of it was her intellectual property, but she kept going and kept going. And he'd be like, you're such a complainer, and we just need to work on this. And he then started getting speaking engagements, and he was out front, and he started talking about himself as the founder rather than the co-founder. They were calling themselves co-founders. And so finally, so she would get press request, and he would be like, send them to me. So finally she was like, no, I'm going to do it myself. Right. And so she started doing press, and then she, through that, started getting called the co-founder. And finally she just recently announced, I'm leaving. Just so you know, this dude put me through it. Right. But it's because they came together. Part of it is, this white man put me through it.
You know why I'm laughing? Because remember the broadcast, the other broadcast, and I was like, you were like, what are you gonna do? I was like, I'm done.
Yeah.
The co-working at the co-working space.
You're like, I'm done. And this was her. She's like, I'm done. And if you want to see me over here doing my thing, come see me. And
here we are. What is it? Months and months and months and months and months later.
But because they didn't have it really clear of what they were doing, she thought she understood. He was probably lying to her, right? And was using her. But still, he may have equally thought.
Did he have to lie? That's the question. No. Did he ever in any of that have to lie? And that's what we're talking about as women. A lot of times, you think people are lying. Nobody has to lie to us, because it's the thing. She didn't want to know.
Yeah.
How much did he have to lie?
No,
but how much she just not want to know?
No, she didn't want to know, and she didn't. And every time she tried to speak to him, he'd be really mean about it, and she just was like, and she kind of faded, and that's fine. It's hard to go up against somebody who's going to talk to you in a mean way. That's an indicator if somebody's talking to you in a mean way. But my point is that they didn't clarify, and so it's easy when you come together, particularly with somebody that you have. You're like, hey, I have this idea, and let's kind of share, and we're going to ping pong back and forth. Very quickly, that can get out of hand if you don't just stop and say, let's talk about what we're doing. Here's my plan. All you have to do is say, here's what I'm planning to do. What are you planning to do with this? Right? Because it may be, well, I just want to talk about it. That's fine. Somebody else may be like, yeah, I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go create this organization. Right? So we're talking about, we're going to start boycotting advertisers. And somebody may be like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to write an article about it. Right? And so then you say, well, I want to write an article about it. Huh?
Because I mean, now is the perfect time.
But
If
you
she
got to,
ever wanted to step out front, where Black
yeah.
Lives Matter a lot
Oh,
now.
she's yeah, and she is separated, and she's actually basically every ism. She's like, look, this has happened to me, me too, and all this. And she's and now she's
Right.
doing her own thing, and she's got her relationships, and it's established, and she'll be fine, right? She's going to go do her own
Mhm.
thing. So the point of it is that lots of times there's room for many people to do the same thing. So that's not a problem, but you have to be clear what it is that what is your expectation in the conversation. And so I've been on this side of where I was talking to someone that I thought was considering hiring me for services, right? And instead they just took the meat of the conversation that we had, and they did it without me. And so
Mhm.
I can't be mad at that about that, because I didn't
Yes, you
clarify
can.
that. But
You
I
can
said
be
I didn't.
mad.
Well, I sure can, but if I didn't clarify that what we were
Right.
having was part of a process, that this conversation is part of a process in which you were planning to engage me, and if I hadn't given them what they needed to do without me, right? Then that's on me. But it's because, again, it's where you get very fuzzy. And part of it is, if you can take something and you don't need me to do it, God bless you. I don't
Right.
do it, right?
Right.
At this point in my
Right.
life, I'm like, do it. But it's this thing of saying, even if you're in business, you may not be clarifying up front what is the purpose of this interchange, where you're thinking, oh, we're just pinging ideas, but the other person's thinking, yeah, we're looking at going, and particularly the person who's thinking they're going to get paid out of this, right? Is, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'm pitching you for services. I am, I'm talking about entering into a contract. So this is, a lot of times, this is the way that you do this, is if you start to
Mm-hmm.
talk to somebody about it, you say, look, this is what I get paid to do, right? So
Right.
this is what I do for work. And before we get too far into this, let's just clarify what we're talking about, right? And here's how much I get paid, and here's what here's what I do. And if a person is like, oh, sure, yeah, let's talk, right? Or they're like, no, I'm not, that's not what I'm really interested in. Then you can decide you just want to talk anyway. That's fine. It doesn't mean that you don't share with people or whatever. But a lot of times
Mm-hmm.
that's just it. You just like, look, this is what I do for a living, and here is this, and here's how this functions in the greater piece of what I'm doing for a living. And
So you
that's
don't
all you
get
got to do.
undermined. Yeah.
Exactly.
Otherwise, people are going to undermine you all of the time. And part of this, a lot of times when we talk about ghosting, just lastly here, a lot of times we're ghosting on ourselves. We're
Yes.
sticking our
Yes.
head in the sand. We're not.
Yeah.
Be clear and be concise. Going into every situation, first having a conversation, that
Mm-hmm.
hard conversation with
Mm-hmm.
yourself. What do you want out of this? And then putting those things forth, because what we oftentimes do at the end of the day or at the beginning of the day, we get
Mm-hmm.
mad at the people who got out of it what they wanted out of it,
Yeah.
because they knew how to focus on them. They knew how to
Yeah.
focus on what they wanted. And too
Yeah.
many times it's often not women. So
Yeah.
we are coming to you guys twice a week to help us put the focus and learn from each other, and learn
Mm-hmm.
from some of our experiences, some of our behaviors. There's some behaviors that we really, really need to hone in on. All right, guys, we're going to get ready to get out of here. This was a great conversation. We started out, for those of you that came in along the way, the beginning of this, if you go back and watch the beginning, we talked, we actually had a great conversation with one of our leading men, and comments came on. We were talking about, of course, here in Atlanta, Angela and I are both outside of Atlanta, and John Lewis, his body was flown back to the city, and it is now have been placed in the state capitol, and the public is lined up outside there now going in. The speeches have already taken place. You're going to see some of those clips out and about. We talked about that also, because we were wondering, about passing of the torch. There's a position that needs to be filled, and went down a couple of storylines of some civil rights moments, because again, we're in Atlanta, and civil rights people are all around us everywhere. Lots of
Exactly.
historic neighborhoods, and we see these people. And I'm pretty sure, wherever everybody else is from, you guys are doing that too. But we see these people, one, because of the work that we both did prior to some 5 years ago. We've, both have been in different capacities for the last 5 years, part of that caregiving for both of us. That's our common bond, caregiving for our mothers and family members and so forth. And also working to help women advance themselves and elevate themselves in businesses. I tend to kind of shy away, and I really, after this current ghosting situation, shy away from the entrepreneur. But we love to come on it and just really talk about our experiences, because
Mhm.
I just believe giving us the opportunity to communicate, which is where we women need to get stronger in communicating and negotiating. And so we're going to
Yes.
pick that up. We don't know what's going to be the topic on Sunday because we got a whole lot of week left, but we will be here with you guys 1:30 Eastern time. Oh, we took past Sunday off, but on Wednesday, prime time, because we are in the afternoon, Angela and I have decided to give you one more broadcast. So get ready for this, because we were definitely, it's not gonna be just I'm gonna be here, Angela's gonna be there, and then we're gonna fill that bottom part up with you guys, and it's called Leading Women Prime Time. So we will have a prime time episode on the first, we said first Wednesday of the month,
First
Angela?
Wednesday of the month. Yes.
First Wednesday of the month, Leading Women Prime Time. So email Angela at Leading Women Podcast at gmail.com, right?
Yes.
If you'd like to be on with us, if you know someone that likes to be on with us, if you got a book, you're an author, you are surviving the pandemic, you are leading women, you are a leading man, you got a story, we'll be putting together those editorials and inviting. And of course, we always invite you on each time we're on. We always put a link in the description up there if you want to come on camera. But specifically, we want to plan your visit with us on first Wednesdays. Looking forward to some great conversation. Again, today is the anniversary. So shout out to Mediascope. They were on with us last week. They have the after party. They have the broadcast tonight and the after party tonight. They got a DJ coming on tonight, Angela. So everybody head over and check out Mediascope. Also, go for more of our episodes. There it is right there going across your screen. LeadingWomenWeekly.com. I'm going to turn it over to Angela. She's going to give us some leading women words of wisdom for us to end our broadcast. All right, Angela.
So my leading women words of wisdom are: don't be afraid to have a difficult conversation, and it will save a whole lot of pain down the road for both parties. And what may seem, you don't know if it's going to be difficult, but even if it is, if to the extent that you can, right, it's easier just to end a thing, right? Even if it's just like, you know what, this is not working for me, I'm sorry, right? You don't even have to say I'm sorry, but if you can do that, I tell you, it's gonna that gives you a closure that's going to make you feel better, even if you think you're protecting yourself by ghosting. And if you're ghosted, it ain't about you. I promise you, it's not about you.
All right, everybody. Please have yourselves the rest of a great week. I don't know about y'all, but I want some pizza so bad.
Same. I've been wanting pizza.
And I got a fridge full of food. I made barbecue chicken yesterday, and I got some wings in there, but I want a slice of pizza so bad. And I have not had anything to eat, and I have survived this broadcast.
You poor
so
thing.
I'm gonna
go
find
eat.
me some pizza. All right, y'all. Have a great week. Bye.
Bye-bye.